Welcome back to Thrive in the Word. We're studying through the book of 1 Peter, and today we're in the first chapter, verse number 13. And what Peter is writing about is he's writing to the Jewish believers who are being persecuted. They're going through a very difficult time. In fact, I've said this before, but I believe that's one of the reasons why the Lord has directed us to the book of 1 Peter for this study, is because the world itself is going through a very difficult time. There are believers being persecuted all around the world, and they need to know the message of 1 Peter. So 1 Peter, the first chapter, the first part of the chapter deals with trials and what trials produce and what trials do. But then starting with verse number 13, Peter begins to talk about how to overcome trials. Now, we talked about two of the things that are mentioned in verse number 13. First of all, that we need to gird our minds, and that means we need to control what we're thinking. The word gird there means to tightly fasten or tightly control something. We need to control our thinking. And then we talked about how we need to be sober, and that doesn't mean to be sober as like you just drank a bunch of vinegar. That word sober there means to be watchful, to be always on the alert. And then the next thing that Peter says here, and this is so vitally important, he says, fix your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Now, grace, a lot of times people will say grace is unmerited favor, and you know what? That is absolutely right. Grace is completely unmerited. Grace is a gift given to us. But what grace does for us is grace strengthens us. Sometimes we talk about the grace gifts that are found in the Bible, the gifts that are given to the body of Christ. Well, the grace is given along with those gifts to do or to perform those giftings. Many times missionaries will, when they leave the country, they'll use this term, well, the grace is gone. In other words, God has lifted his grace or his ability for us to live in that country, and he's moving us to another country, into another place. You see, we need to understand that when Peter here is talking about grace, he's not just talking about favor. He's talking about favor that comes to us, but that favor brings about an ability to stand. Now, notice what he says here. He says, fix your hope. In other words, put your hope. Put it in not making it through the trial, but put your hope in the grace. In other words, look forward to, expect it. That's what hope is. Hope is an expectancy. So expect the grace of God. And then he says, fix your hope completely on the grace of God to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. What's he talking about? He's talking about when these people go on to meet the Lord. How many of you know that the word revelation really means to be seen or to be revealed? How many of you realize that when we die as believers, that immediately we enter the presence of Jesus and we see him face to face? Now remember that Peter is writing to Jewish believers, and these Jewish believers are giving their lives for the sake of the gospel. Persecution is running rampant all around the world, especially persecution that's coming from other Jewish people towards Jewish believers. And believers are being put to death. Now the Roman Empire has now stepped in, and they are joining up, and they are putting Christians to death. They are killing Christians. And so what's Peter saying? He's saying, look and put your hope in the grace of God. What's he saying? He's saying when it comes to that point in which you are about to lose your life, expect the grace of God to be there. Expect God to give you the strength to go through that trial. Now let's bring this into the modern day. Maybe you're not experiencing the persecution of your faith, but yet you're going through trials. You know what? One of the things that you need to put and fix your eyes on and fix your mind on is that God is going to give you the ability to make it through. He is either going to change the circumstance, or he's going to give you the ability to continue through it until the circumstance changes. How many of you realize that we already talked about this, that trials are only temporary? They're only here for a season. And God is going to give you the ability. So one of the things that Peter is saying and telling us how to overcome trials is he's saying you need to fix your eyes or fix your minds, fix your hope, your expectancy on the grace of God. Do you know what? You and God can overcome anything. And that's what Peter is saying. And then verse number 14, and he continues this teaching on how to overcome. And he says, as obedient children, do not be conformed to the former lust, which were yours in your ignorance. What's he telling us? He's telling us that we need to not give in to the former desires. We need to continue to obey the Lord. Continue to leave and flee the desires that we formerly walked in. And it says, do not be conformed. And this word conformed actually means to be pressed into a mold. It means to be pressed in and made like something else. And so he's saying, don't be conformed. Don't allow these lusts, these out of control desires, which you formerly walked in, don't allow them to control your life. You see, one of the things that happens is in the times of hardship, one of the temptations is for us to go backwards. So Peter is basically saying to these Jewish believers, don't go backwards. Don't go back to those old desires for comfort, those old desires for peace, those old desires for safety. Don't go back. Go forward. And so in the time of trials, I say to you, don't go backward. Go forward. Press on. Don't quit.